Hello everyone, this is Mike, WB@VG, and we're going to take and replace and or repair the PTO in this classic Omni D. It needs a good cleaning, re-greasing, so we shall give that a shot. To get to the PTO, we have to take all the front knobs off, front panel, and that aluminum bezel. The microphone and the headphone jacks, along with the 0-beat switch, those nuts should be taken off with a hollow nut driver. Don't risk damaging the front panel by trying to use the slip joint pliers. When you take off the front panel, you'll notice there's a connector that plugs into it. It looks like a glorified transistor socket. Lower down the front panel and then gently remove that plug. There's also a screw in the very front panel, right in the center of the PTO, that needs to be removed before you can pull the panel off. And there it is, the front panel. Now is an excellent time to get some soap and water, no harsh chemicals, and clean behind the switches and clean the back panels. Also, you notice on the toggle switches, you'll find these black, like washers. Those go over the toggle switches. So remove those. One on each toggle switch. And now, make a mental note not to forget to put those back when you reassemble everything, because you'll have to take everything apart if you forget one. This is the headphone and mic jacks. It's really easy to get those two swapped, and you'll put the phone jack where the microphone jack is supposed to be. So mark at least one of them so you know where they go, because if you don't get it right, you gotta take everything apart. There's a metal bracket that goes across the radio, small filter board. Audio goes there, and there's a screw behind the PTO shield. That has got to come off. If you want to be brave, you can leave this circuit board attached, but I find it's easier and safer just to remove the two little screws and let it kind of dangle by itself. There are 4 screws here, here, and here. I already have them removed. You can also take off the little bracket that I call a light shield, and remove the frequency counter input cable, and the whole thing just kind of set and lean it back like so. You don't have to unsolder any wires off of it if you don't want to. In fact, I don't know why you'd want to, but just lean it back like that. And right there is our PTO. Now, I can tell you, somebody's been in there before. TEN TEC wires are notorious for melting, so use a long nose pliers to hold the insulation back to keep those from melting. And before you do anything, get a piece of paper and a pencil and write down what color wire goes to what pin, or you'll never get it back right. When you have all the wires disconnected, remove the 2 front screws right here holding the PTO. Make sure the ground for the shield and the coax is disconnected from the solder nut, and lift the back end up a little bit and it will come right out like so. And there you have it, a PTO from a TEN TEC Omni D Series C. Cute little stinker. +2, -2, +2, -2. I shall never know. This one is in bad shape. Look at the cracks. crack there. You notice on those screws, there's 2 washers. Those washers determine how much pressure is pushed up against the bearing races. Too much pressure and you'll actually dent the race, because the steel ball bearings are obviously harder than the brass. So it's kind of a balancing act. The more washers you add, the less pressure against the race, and you have a tendency to slip. If you take too many washers out, then you'll end up damaging the brass race. 2 seems to be about the standard I've always found them with, but looks like I'm going to have to scare up another one of these rear bushings somewhere, because that is not going to be able to be used. Well, it looks like we're going to have to attack the junk box. Now that you got the PTO out, this is an excellent time to take all the knobs, hot soapy water, clean all the goobers and fingerprints off of them, and basically go ahead and lube up all the controls while you're at it. Some of them you can't get to unless you take the front panel off, especially the front flip switches. So give them a little shot of deoxit. Don't bury the things in deoxit, just a little bit. And then we'll go ahead and take the PTO apart. Well, it's no wonder that thing chirped, clicked, whistled. Well, I got to talk about some goobers in there. I don't even know what this thing is. Well, like something came apart. Oh, that's going to be a messy mess. Clean that thing out of there. This is the TEN TEC PTO in all its glory. 2 places you don't want to mess with. This coil and that coil. What you want to do in a rebuild is to get the dry grease out of the bearings that run in this brass race. You also want to take the grease out of the rear bearing. Notice the 2 washers under this ear and the 2 bearing washers underneath this ear. Those washers set the tension on how hard the ball bearings are pressed into the race. If you take out all the washers, you'll end up damaging that race because there's just too much pressure. Now, what you can do, this, by the way, did not come out of the Omni D, this the Corsair. You can just take a Q-tip, go in there with some rubbing alcohol, isopropyl alcohol, clean that out, clean out the spring, clean out the brass shaft, and that will probably take care of about 80% of the problems. However, if you really want to do it right, this rear shaft has to come off, the spring comes out. This is called a pistol that goes into the inductor. That all has to be disassembled. And it's not hard to do, but it'll take an hour or 2 if you haven't done one. I can do one in about 45 minutes, but take your time, and we'll get back to it. What we're going to do first is take the screws off this back. TEN TEC glued the coil forms in, and if you're lucky, that little nut will stay where it's supposed to be, which will really ease disassembly. Oh, see, that one's going to be loose. You stinker. Take him out of there. There's 2 washers. There's the bearing. Ew, nasty. Some washers. Washer there. And it's stuck on this back. Stuck on the back. Now I'm going to go get myself a little container to put my hardware in. I'll have it all over the place. Right back. what we're going to do first is take the screws off this back. TEN TEC glued the coil forms in, and if you're lucky, that little nut will stay where it's supposed to be, which will really ease disassembly. Oh, see, that one's going to be loose. You stinker. Take him out of there. Two washers. There's the bearing. Ew, nasty. Some washers. Washer there. And it's stuck on this back. Stuck on the back. Now I'm going to go get myself a little container to put my hardware in. I'll have it all over the place. Right back. You'll notice on the back end of that spring, there's a washer. That actually goes on the inside of the bearing. Don't forget that washer. Get off the stinker. Oh boy. The whole spring comes off. Be that way. I can tell that grease hasn't been moved in years. Now, you can actually take and move the race and the whole shebang out of its little container. We need to remove this part now. And that's screwed into the aluminum box, so you can unscrew that. See it coming out. When you get it all out, you can move it out, then take the nut off. Yeah, one nut. Yeah, pull out the little brass part. Like that. And you got yourself a little spring. Now on the edge of that spring, you'll see this goofy looking thing. It almost looks like a piece of broken plastic. You notice how it's the wedge part. You know what? See the wedge part? The wedge part goes into that angled part of the pistol. That's important. Don't lose that little guy. I don't know what you'd use the replacement with. Now, when you got that out, you can see the bearings have already almost fallen out of the race. Hold that and pull the shaft out. Yuck. Now then, the race right here, I'll put him back in his hole. And you can see the ball bearings. One of them's already fell out. So we'll see if we can't pick him up. All right, be that way. All right, put him away. We still can't get that shaft out. And that's because on the back end, you'll see the world's smallest little roll pin. That has got to come out too. Notice also there's another one of those plastic wedges and a washer. So let's grab a hold of here, pliers, and gently pull out that pin. That goes. Now then, since that's out, we can take, you hold the pistol, you can unscrew it. Comes right out. Don't lose those bearings. Oh, that would be a bad day. And there it comes out. Then take the pistol out, put him aside. And I'm going to take these bearings off of that shaft off camera because I don't want to lose them either. All right, I was able to get the ball bearings all secured, and we can pop out the race. Right there it is. Notice how the grease just kind of all goobered together. And that's what makes these things so difficult to tune. They drift and they jump, and you know, there's been an awful lot of people on the internet, some people on the reflectors, saying you can fix it by just dribbling in some super oil penetrant, but to really do it and make it factory nice, you gotta disassemble the thing, give it a cleaning and a half. And that looks pretty good. We'll have to get it some more goopers. And right there, that's how you take off all the pieces parts to get into that PTO. So what we're going to do now, get some alcohol, get everything cleaned up, and then we'll re-lube it and reassemble it. It doesn't take much rocket science to know that you clean this thing. I use big toot, basically Q-tips. Push in through those holes. Just look at the gunk that's coming out of there. You want to make sure that I'm down through the spline that thing out. Ugh. That reminds me of my ex-wife's cooking. Clean that out. Holes there. Holes there. And then alcohol. Let's look at that stuff's coming off of there. Yeesh. I sure like to know how they made those. If they had a CNC machine to turn these things out by the hundreds, or they have old Frank back there, 106 years old, turning out brass shafts on a manual lathe. The actual shaft, the bearings roll in this groove into the race. I've yet to found any problems with these, except for once in a while you get one that's been bent. And I contacted a local machine shop about having one of them made. It was several $100s. Most of that money was for the setup. Had I been rich and famous at the time, I would have had probably 100 of them made, because the actual cost per unit was like a couple bucks. It was the setup fees that really horrendous. All right. I cleaned out the brass race. Nice and shiny, no dents. Now, when you get, if you could still get them anymore, the original TEN TEC PTO rebuild kit, they want you to take and use a little super glue to hold that in there. And actually that's a pretty good idea, because if not, frustration levels go out the sky. So, like the old Brill cream ad says, A little dab will do ya. Now we're gonna have to wait till that sets up. And when it does, we'll come back. Well, now that the super glue has done its thing, we can reassemble some of this. Everything got a good cleaning. Put that in, well, I guess put the pistol in. Then thread that in, like so. Next, we put the spring onto that shaft. Then that goofy little wedge. The wedge part goes up against the pistol, like so. And of course, I just put that on backwards. There you go, dummy. Okay, let's try that again. There we go. Oh, I'll tell you. And of course, the little nut goes on next. Then we want to screw that shaft back into the case itself. We want it just about flush with the case. And then we can take and tighten the nut down. All right. Now then, the fun begins. Off camera, I put in the little roll pin because I was saying bad words. But once you get the roll pin on, you can no longer pull the shaft out from the PTO. Now, it's time to put the bearings in. Everybody has their own super secret sauce. I use this stuff called lube gel. A little bit in there. And we want to put some in the bearing race, just a little bit right now. And we're going to put some in the actual holes. where the ball bearings will set in. And make sure you put this in first. And what we want to do let's see, get a hold of one of them. Just drop the bearing into its little hole, like that. Now then, rotate it gently, get to the next hole. Add a little grease. The grease isn't what you think it is right now as far as being a lubricant. It's actually used to hold those bearings in place. Kind of almost like a caulk. Okay. Push back on the shaft. And drop another one in there. Okay, we're two for three now. I don't know what that is, but he's out of there. Okay, a little bit more grease to hold him in there. All right. Drop the last ball bearing in the spot. And there you are. All three bearings. All three bearings are now in a race. And the dog's barking. Okay, we want to put the little wedge goes down, and we did that after we put the bearing in. We're going to push back a little bit gently so we don't knock the bearings out. Make sure that thing is seated. So like, see how it's seated right there. Okay. Now then, there's a washer goes, the spring goes there, and on the bearing cap, a little gob of grease. Now, TEN TEC wants you to put the bevel end down. So, we'll put the bevel end down. Kind of squish him in there. There. I've already put a little bit of lubricant inside. Then we'll kind of test fit that. Okay, rear in, as the hackers would say. This has always been a struggle to get those two washers and a nut through the screw. That's why it's good if this nut stays stuck from the glue from the factory. That way it's one less thing you have to hold on to. So, finger one in, and we screw it in, but not all the way. You don't want that all the way in yet because you have the other side to do. And I'm going to do that off camera. Once you get the one in, because that's the nut that was stuck with the loop, the second nut, bolt, screw, whatever you want to call it, it's not so bad. But you'll need a thin needle nose pliers. Grab a hold of him like that. And then oh, you stinker. There we go. Now, there's no torque spec for these, but it's plastic. You don't need to get crazy. Just tighten them up. I'd say finger tight and a little bit more. Now then, what you really need to do to finish it up, put a little bit of grease on top of the screw. I should say spring. You want to put some grease into the bearing race, a little bit here, and that should take care of it. So we'll just, and like the ad says, a little dab will do you. It's not like this thing's going 10,000 miles an hour. That's good. We'll grease that up a little bit here. And we'll run that back all the way. There, get around the corners. And then I put just a wee bit on the shaft. Some guys will take and actually grease the threads up before they run the pistol in. I don't even think that's necessary. And that's it. That's how you rebuild a TEN TEC PTO. Here's a little tip for you. When you're done, take a knob, put it on the shaft, give it a turn, tighten it up, and then run it through its paces. Get that grease all distributed back and forth. Oh, I tell you what, there's no grinds, no bumps, no humps. That feels about as good as a TEN TEC PTO from the factory will ever feel. Yeah. And if you didn't mess with the two coils, you've got a 99% chance that the linearity and the frequencies of the PTO is going to be just right on the money, provided you didn't go in there and bump around things. For goodness sakes, make it better by trying to adjust it. So other than that, I'd say that completes the PTO once and for all. Put it all back together. Just a little bit of lube gel. See, like everybody has their own secret sauce when it comes to greasing these things. I use stuff called lube gel, and you don't need to drown it like the other one. Put the knob back on, it makes it easier to run it back and forth. Just a little thin film of grease on the top of the spring, and on the actual bearing surface itself. 2 washers on the back, and we should be able to put it back together and put it back in the radio soon. Oh, all back together. That really is a really nice radio. With the PTO rebuilt, it should last for another 20 years, long after I'm gone.